My father introduced me to his business partners as just the assistant. I was standing right next to him. In the conference room I had booked. At the meeting I had prepared. With the presentation I had built from scratch at 2 a.m. the night before. "This is Zara," he said, barely looking at me. "She helps out around the office." The men across the table nodded politely and looked away. I smiled, said nothing, opened my laptop and pulled up slide 1. That was 3 years ago. Last month, my father threw a party to announce his retirement. He stood at the head of the table in his best suit, holding a glass of champagne, and told 40 guests that he was handing the company over to my brother Cameron, a man who had worked there for exactly 11 months. I sat at table 6, near the back, next to the coat rack, and I thought, okay, let them have their party. Because 2 days later, I made one phone call, and everything they were celebrating, gone. Welcome to Hidden Family Betrayal. I'm Zara, 27 years old, MBA graduate, and for 8 years the person who actually ran my father's company while being introduced as just the assistant. This is the story of how my parents built a business on my back, handed it to my brother for showing up, and how one document my father forgot he signed changed everything. Drop a comment if you've ever been the person who did all the work while someone else took all the credit, because this one is for you. Let me tell you how it started. My father, Raza Malik, built Malik Enterprises from nothing. A small import-export business in 2001 started from a rented office the size of a bathroom. By the time I was born, it had grown into something real. Supply chain contracts, warehouse space, a team of 12. But growth is one thing. Running a business is another. My father was a visionary. He could walk into a room and make people believe in things that didn't exist yet. He had charm, connections, a handshake that closed deals. What he didn't have was systems. No proper accounting, no vendor contracts that held up legally, no HR structure, no inventory software, just folders, handshakes, and a bookkeeper named Uncle Salim who had been using the same Excel sheet since 2004. I saw all of this at 18. I didn't say anything. I went to university, finished my MBA at 24, and came home with one goal: fix what was quietly breaking. My father hired me officially, junior operations manager, salary that was less than what he paid the warehouse supervisor, but I took it because I wasn't there for the title. I was there for the company. Within 6 months, I had rebuilt the vendor contract system from scratch. Within a year, I had implemented accounting software, renegotiated 3 supplier agreements, and recovered almost 40 lakh rupees in unbilled receivables that Uncle Salim had simply missed. My father noticed. He patted me on the shoulder once and said, "Good girl." That was my performance review. Meanwhile, my brother Kamran was living in Dubai, working at his friend's events company, posting photos of rooftop dinners. He called home every Sunday. He made my father laugh. He called him Baba in a soft voice and asked about his health. I called my father to tell him the Q3 numbers were up 23%. He said, "Send it in an email." By the time I was 26, I was running daily operations, managing a team of 31 people, handling client relationships, and preparing the annual audit. My official title had been upgraded exactly once to Senior Operations Manager. At a supplier dinner that year, my father introduced me to a client from Lahore. "This is Zara," he said. "She helps out around the office." The client shook my hand. "Ah, the assistant. Your father speaks highly of you." I looked at my father. He was already turning away, laughing at something someone else had said. I smiled at the client. "Yes," I said. "I help out." I went home that night and updated my resume for the first time in 4 years. Not because I was leaving, but because I needed to remember that what I had built had value, even if my father couldn't see it. That was the moment I started paying closer attention to the paperwork, and that's when I found something my father had completely forgotten about, something that would matter very, very much at a party that hadn't happened yet. I want you to understand something about running a family business. You don't just do your job, you do everyone's job. You cover the gaps nobody talks about. You fix the problems nobody admits exist, and you do it quietly because if you speak up, you're difficult. If you push back, you're ungrateful. If you ask for recognition, you're making it about yourself. So you stay quiet. You keep working. You tell yourself, they see it. They know. One day it will matter. I told myself that for 8 years. I was wrong. Almost. It was a Tuesday evening in March. I was staying late, which was not unusual. I stayed late most nights. The office emptied out by 6, and I usually left around 9 after finishing whatever the day had left unresolved. That night, I was going through the document archive. We were preparing for an annual audit, and I needed the original incorporation papers, the ones filed when Lakh Enterprises was first registered. Uncle Salim's filing system was chaos. Folders inside folders. Papers misfiled by year, by name, by nothing at all. I had been meaning to digitize everything for 2 years, but there was always something more urgent. I found the incorporation folder at the back of the bottom drawer. Inside were the original registration documents, the first tax filings, some old letterhead, and underneath all of that, a folded envelope, cream-colored, old, my father's handwriting on the front, Lakh Enterprises, Partnership Restructuring, 2019. I sat down slowly. That was the year I turned 24, the year I joined the company, the year my father had told me very casually over dinner one evening that he had done some paperwork to make the business structure cleaner. I had asked what kind of paperwork. He had said, just formalities, don't worry about it. I had not worried about it. I was worrying about it now. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside were 3 documents, stapled together, signed and notarized. The first was a partnership restructuring agreement. The second was a profit-sharing amendment. The third was a silent partner designation, and my name was on it. Not as an employee, not as just the assistant, as a 25% silent partner of Lakh Enterprises. I read it 4 times. Then I read it again. In 2019, when my father had restructured the business to bring in an outside investor, his lawyer had advised him to distribute existing equity before adding new partners. My father had given my mother 25%. He had kept 50% for himself, and he had allocated 25% to me, his most operationally involved family member, according to the legal language in the document. He had signed it. His lawyer had signed it. It had been notarized by the Commonwealth, and then he had filed it in the back of a drawer and apparently forgotten it existed, or assumed I would never find it, or assumed it didn't matter because I was just the assistant and would never think to look. I sat in that empty office for a long time. Outside, the city was doing its normal Tuesday evening things. Traffic, lights, people going home to families who maybe saw them, maybe didn't. I thought about the supplier dinner. She helps out around the office. I thought about 8 years of late nights and early mornings and performance reviews that were a pat on the shoulder. I thought about my brother Kamran in Dubai, posting rooftop dinner photos, calling Baba every Sunday in his soft voice. I took out my phone and photographed all 3 documents. Then I folded them carefully and put them back exactly where I had found them. I didn't say anything to my father. I didn't say anything to anyone. I just went home, sat at my kitchen table, and started making a very quiet, very careful plan. Because here is what I had learned in 8 years of running a business nobody thought I was running. Timing is everything. You don't play your cards when you find them. You wait. You watch. You let the other side show their hand first. And my father, bless him, was about to show his hand in the most public way possible. 2 weeks later, he called me into his office. He was in a good mood. I could tell by the way he was sitting, leaned back, jacket off, the posture of a man who has already decided something and just needs to tell you about it. "Zara," he said, "I've been thinking about the future of the company." I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap. I waited. "Kamran is coming back from Dubai," he said, "permanently. I think it's time to bring him properly into the business." I said, "What does that mean, properly?" My father smiled. "I'm making him director of operations." The title I had been doing for 3 years without the title. "And what happens to my role?" I asked. He waved his hand. You'll support him? Show him the ropes? You know this place better than anyone. You can help him get up to speed. Support him. Show him the ropes. 8 years. MBA. 40 lakh rupees recovered. 23% growth in 1 quarter. Help him get up to speed. I looked at my father, this man I had given 8 years of my life to, this man whose company I had rebuilt from the inside out, this man who had introduced me to clients as the help, and I said the most dangerous thing I had ever said to him. I said, "Okay, Baba, whatever you think is best." He looked relieved. He had expected a fight. I wasn't going to fight. Not yet. Because in 3 weeks my father was throwing his retirement party. 40 guests, champagne, a big announcement about the future of Malik Enterprises, and I was going to let him have every single minute of it, right up until the moment I made one phone call. Let me tell you about the 3 weeks between that office conversation and the party. Because those 3 weeks were the quietest and the hardest of my life. I went to work every single day. Same time, same desk, same smile. I trained Cameron on the inventory system, the same system I had built. I walked him through the vendor relationships, the same relationships I had spent years developing. I explained the audit process, the same process I had designed from scratch. Cameron was not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. He was just completely unqualified for what he was being handed. He asked me on his 3rd day why we used a particular supplier in Karachi instead of a cheaper option in Lahore. I explained the quality difference, the delivery reliability, the 3-year relationship that had gotten us priority pricing. He nodded and said, "Yeah, but the other one is cheaper," I said. "The last time we used a cheaper supplier, we lost a client worth 60 lakh rupees." He said, "That was probably bad luck." This was the man who was being made director of operations. My mother called me the week before the party. She had always been the softer one, quieter than my father, less present in the business, but always watching, always aware. "Zara," she said, "are you okay?" I told her I was fine. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father loves you. He has an idea in his head about how things should be, about Cameron." I said, "I know, Mama." She said, "Don't do anything that hurts the family." I said, "I would never. I meant it. What I was planning didn't hurt the family. It just made the truth visible. There's a difference." The party was on a Friday evening. My father had rented a banquet hall, the nice one near the commercial district with the chandeliers and the waitstaff in black uniforms. 40 guests, business partners, old clients, family friends, 2 uncles who had been invested in the company for years without ever doing a single thing. I wore a dark green dress, professional, simple, the kind of outfit you wear when you want to be taken seriously and know you won't be. I arrived early and helped with the setup, because of course I did. I checked the catering arrangements, confirmed the AV system for my father's presentation, made sure the seating chart was printed correctly. The event coordinator thanked me and asked if I was with the catering company. I said, "No, I'm with the family." She said, "Oh, wonderful. Are you a cousin?" I said, "I'm the one who kept this company running for 8 years. She laughed like I had made a joke. I smiled and went to find my seat, table 6, near the back, next to the coat rack, just like I told you. The party started at 7. By 8, the room was full and loud and warm. My father moved through it like a man in his element, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, laughing that big laugh of his that filled whatever room he was in. Cameron stood next to him. Fresh haircut, new suit. The look of a man who had just won a lottery he hadn't bought a ticket for. I sat at table 6 and talked to my aunt about her garden and watched. At 8:30, my father tapped his glass. The room went quiet. He stood at the head of the main table, my mother beside him, Cameron on his other side. The chandelier light made everything golden. It looked like a painting, the kind of painting that tells a story that isn't completely true. "Tonight," my father said, "I want to talk about legacy." He talked for 12 minutes. I know because I counted. He talked about starting the company with nothing, about the early years, the hard years, the years of doubt. He talked about building something from scratch and watching it grow. He talked about the pride of a father seeing his children carry what he had built. He mentioned me once. Zara has been a tremendous support to the operations team, he said. We couldn't have kept things running without her help. The room applauded politely. Support to the operations team, her help. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. Then he put his hand on Kamran's shoulder. But tonight, he said, his voice getting bigger, I am proud to announce that Malik Enterprises will move forward under new leadership. My son, my heir, the future of everything I have built. The room erupted. Applause. Someone cheered. One of my uncles actually stood up. Kamran shook my father's hand and then hugged him. My mother was crying softly. The photographer was taking pictures. I sat at table 6 and felt something settle inside me. Not anger, not sadness. Clarity. Complete quiet clarity. I had waited 8 years for my father to see me. 3 years to be given the title I had already earned. 8 months since he told me Kamran was taking over. And I had spent all of that time being patient, being professional, being the good daughter who helped out around the office. I looked at Kamran laughing and shaking hands. I looked at my father beaming. I looked at 40 people celebrating a decision that was built entirely on a foundation I had laid, and I thought, they have no idea. I picked up my phone, opened my contacts, found the name I had saved 3 weeks ago after a very quiet, very careful conversation with a very good corporate lawyer named Mr. Farouk. I typed one message. We're ready. Please proceed as discussed. I pressed send. Then I put my phone face down on the table, finished my water, and watched the rest of the party with something I can only describe as peace. The call Mr. Farouk made the next morning was not dramatic. It was 4 minutes long. It was to my father's personal lawyer, and it referenced one document, a signed, notarized partnership restructuring agreement from 2019 that gave me 25% ownership of Malik Enterprises. Not as an employee, not as just the assistant, as a legal partner, which meant, under Pakistani corporate law, that any major structural change to the company, including a change in directorship and operational control, required the consent of all partners holding more than 20% equity. My father had announced Kamran as director of operations at a party attended by 40 witnesses, without my consent, without even telling me it was coming as a partner, not as a daughter, not as an employee, but as a legal partner with veto rights. The party ended at 11. By 9 the next morning, my father's phone was ringing, and it wasn't me calling. My father called me at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of chai, my laptop open, and I had been waiting for it. The phone rang twice before I picked up. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask how I was. He said one word. Office. I said, good morning, Baba. Silence. Then, office. Now. I finished my chai, got dressed, drove to the office at my normal time, parked in my normal spot, nodded to the security guard the way I did every morning. Everything exactly the same, except nothing was the same anymore. When I walked into my father's office, there were 4 people in the room. My father, standing behind his desk, not sitting, standing, which he only did when he was angry or nervous. This morning, he was both. Kamran, sitting in the chair across from the desk, arms crossed, jaw tight, looking at me like I had done something to him personally. My father's personal lawyer, Mr. Aziz, a small, careful man in his 60s who had handled my father's legal work for 20 years. He was holding a folder and not making eye contact with anyone. And my mother, sitting in the corner chair near the window, hands folded in her lap, watching me walk in with an expression I couldn't read. I closed the door behind me, sat down in the remaining empty chair, put my bag on the floor, folded my hands exactly the way my mother had folded hers. Good morning, I said again. My father started talking immediately. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the edges of it, the places where the control was working hard. Mr. Farouk called Aziz this morning, he said. He referenced a 2019 partnership document. He claims you have equity in this company. I said, I do have equity in this company. My father's jaw moved. That document was a formality. It was part of a restructuring for investor purposes. It was never meant to give you actual operational rights. I looked at Mr. Aziz. Is that what the document says? Mr. Aziz opened his folder, looked at the papers inside, closed it again. He cleared his throat. The document is quite clear in its language. Miss Zara holds 25% partnership equity with full associated rights under the Companies Act. My father turned to Mr. Aziz. Can we have it overturned? Mr. Aziz paused for exactly the wrong amount of time. It was properly executed, notarized. Both parties signed willingly. To overturn it would require Miss Zara's voluntary agreement or a court process that would take considerable time and considerable visibility. Considerable visibility. Every person in that room understood what that meant. A court case, public records, 40 guests who had attended a retirement party the night before, suddenly learning that the announcement made at that party had a legal problem attached to it. My father sat down. Cameron spoke for the first time. "This is unbelievable," he said. He was looking at me, not at our father. "You waited. You just sat there at the party and said nothing and waited." I said, "I've been waiting for 8 years, Cameron." He shook his head. "This is manipulation. This is exactly what you do. You work quietly, and then you use it against people." I kept my voice even. "I found a legal document with my name on it. I spoke to a lawyer. I asked for what I'm legally entitled to. Which part of that is manipulation? You could have come to Baba directly. You could have talked to the family." "I tried talking to the family," I said, "for 8 years. The room went quiet. My mother spoke from the corner. Her voice was soft, but it filled the room the way soft voices sometimes do, completely, without effort. "Raza," she said. She was talking to my father. "Let her speak." My father looked at my mother. Something passed between them, the private language of people who have been married for 30 years. He leaned back in his chair. "Fine," he said. "Speak." I had prepared for this moment, not with speeches or arguments, with facts, the same way I had always done everything, with documentation. I opened my bag and took out a folder. Inside were 8 years of Lakh Enterprises, reduced to the most important numbers. "When I joined this company," I said, "annual revenue was 2.3 crore. Last financial year, it was 8.7 crore. That's a 278% increase in 8 years. I placed the first document on the desk. Vendor contract losses in 2016 due to unstructured agreements, 34 lakh rupees. After I restructured the contracts in 2017, 0 losses in 5 consecutive years. Second document. Unbilled receivables recovered in my first year, 38 lakh rupees. That money was simply sitting in Uncle Salim's Excel sheet, never chased. Third document. Staff retention rate before I implemented the HR structure, 43%. After, 91%. Do you know what high turnover costs a company this size? In recruitment, in training, in lost institutional knowledge. Fourth document. I placed them one by one on his desk, slowly, clearly. The way you present a case when you have already won it and you just need the other person to see the evidence. "I'm not here to fight," I said. "I'm not here to take anything that isn't mine. I'm here because a document with my name on it was activated, and the law requires us to have a conversation we should have had years ago." My father was looking at the documents, not at me, at the numbers. He was a businessman. Whatever else he was, whatever blind spots he had, whatever ideas he carried about sons and daughters and who should inherit what, he was a businessman first. And businessmen understand numbers. He picked up the first document, read it, put it down, picked up the second. Kamran was watching him. My mother was watching me. Mr. Aziz was studying his own shoes. The office was completely silent except for the sound of my father turning pages. He put the last document down. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, without looking up, "Why didn't you show me these before?" And I said the truest thing I had said in 8 years. "Because you never asked, Baba." The silence after that was different from the silences before it. Not tense, not angry, just heavy. The weight of something true that had finally been said out loud. My father put both hands flat on the desk. He looked at them. Then he looked at me. Really looked at me the way he hadn't in years, maybe ever. I saw something move across his face. Not the businessman calculating numbers, not the father who had an idea in his head about how things should be, something older, something more honest. He said, "I introduced you as the assistant." It wasn't a question, it was a man hearing himself say something for the first time, even though he had done it 100 times. "At the supplier dinner," I said, "and at the co-op meeting in 2021, and at the Lahore client dinner last year." He closed his eyes. Kamran shifted in his chair. "Baba, we still need to figure out what happens with the directorship." "Kamran." My mother's voice from the corner. Quiet, final. Kamran stopped. My father opened his eyes. He looked at Mr. Aziz. "What are our options?" Mr. Aziz opened his folder again, grateful to have something professional to focus on. "Legally, any directorship appointment requires partner consent. Miss Zara's 25% gives her effective veto rights on major structural decisions. The options are 1. Renegotiate the partnership terms with Miss Zara's agreement. 2. Proceed with the directorship appointment with Miss Zara's formal consent. 3. Restructure equity, but that requires all parties to agree." My father nodded slowly. Then he looked at me. "What do you want, Zara?" 8 years. That question. Finally. I had thought about this. I had sat at my kitchen table at midnight more times than I could count and asked myself what I actually wanted, not what I deserved, not what the law entitled me to, what I wanted, and the answer was always the same. "I want what I've been doing to have a title that matches it," I said. "I want to be managing director, not support staff, not the assistant who helps out, the person responsible for operations with the authority that comes with that responsibility." I paused. "Kamran can have a real role. A genuine one, business development, new client acquisition. He's good with people, Baba. Better than me, honestly. That's a real skill. But he needs to learn the business before he leads it. 6 months. Let me work with him properly. Not to train him to replace me, to build something that works." My father looked at Cameron. Cameron was quiet for a long moment. The crossed arms had dropped. The jaw wasn't tight anymore. He looked younger, somehow, like the performance he'd been giving since he walked back from Dubai had paused for a moment. "Is that true?" my father asked him. "About business development?" Cameron looked at the floor, then at me. "She's been handling the client relationships for years. The ones I tried to follow up on last week, they all asked for Zara." It cost him something to say that. I could see it. I said, "You closed the Faisal account introduction last month. I couldn't have done that. I'm not built for that kind of networking." He looked at me. A small thing shifted between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something honest. Something that could become something better eventually. My father picked up the last document from the desk, the one with the revenue numbers. He held it for a moment, then set it down carefully. "Managing director," he said, quietly, like he was trying on the words. Then he said, "And I will remember this for the rest of my life. I should have said it years ago. Not, 'I'm sorry.' My father was not a man who said 'I'm sorry' easily. But I should have said it years ago. For him, that was everything." My mother stood up from the corner chair. She walked to where I was sitting and put her hand on my shoulder, just rested it there, warm and steady. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The official paperwork took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of meetings with Mr. Aziz and Mr. Farouk. 3 weeks of document revisions and equity confirmations and corporate restructuring filings. 3 weeks of my father sitting across conference tables signing papers that formalized what had been true for 8 years, but never written down correctly. I won't pretend those 3 weeks were easy. They weren't. There were hard evenings, nights where I sat in my apartment and questioned everything. Not the decision, I was certain about the decision, but the cost of it. Because here is what nobody tells you about standing up for yourself inside a family business. The win and the wound come together. You can be completely right and still feel the weight of what it took to be seen. You can get exactly what you deserved and still grieve the years you spent not having it. You can sit across from your father while he signs papers giving you a title you already earned and feel proud and sad and relieved and exhausted all at the same time. I felt all of those things. Some days I still do. The restructuring was announced internally first. I called the team together on a Wednesday morning, 31 people. The same team I had been managing for years, the same people who had been reporting to me without the paperwork ever reflecting that reality. I stood at the front of the conference room, the same conference room where my father had introduced me as just the assistant 3 years ago, and I told them about the changes. Managing Director, effective immediately. Kamran, Business Development Director. New role, real responsibility, built around what he was actually good at. My father, transitioning to chairman, advisory role, present but stepping back. The room was quiet for about 3 seconds. Then Haroon from the accounts team started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. Not politely, not the careful applause of people who feel obligated. The real kind, the kind that comes from people who had watched the right thing happen after a long time of watching the wrong thing. Our warehouse manager, Tariq, a man of very few words who had worked at Malik Enterprises for 11 years, caught my eye across the room and nodded once. That nod meant more to me than any title. Kamran found me after the meeting. He waited until everyone else had left. He stood in the doorway of the conference room with his hands in his pockets, the same posture Derek had in the original story, but without the calculation behind it. Kamran just looked like a man who had something to say and wasn't sure how to say it. "I didn't know," he said, "about the numbers, about what you had actually been doing here." I leaned against the conference table. "I know you didn't. Baba told me the company needed fresh leadership. He made it sound like things were, I don't know, stagnant, like you had been maintaining it but not growing it." I said, 278% revenue growth in 8 years. Kamran closed his eyes briefly. "Yeah, I saw the documents." He was quiet for a moment, then, "I'm sorry, Zara, for walking in here like I owned the place, for not asking questions I should have asked." It was a genuine apology, no performance, no calculation, just a younger brother realizing he had been handed a story that wasn't complete. "Work hard," I said. "That's all I ask. Learn the business properly. Don't cut corners. And when you don't know something, ask me. Not because I'm above you, because I've been here and I know things that aren't written down anywhere." He nodded. "Deal." We didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we shook hands, and it was a real handshake, the kind that means something. My father called me into his office the Friday after the restructuring was announced. It was late afternoon. The office was mostly empty. The light through his window was that low golden color that only happens in the last hour before sunset. He was sitting at his desk, but differently than usual. Not the posture of a man running a meeting or making a decision, just sitting. Tired in the way that people get tired after they've been carrying something heavy for a long time and finally put it down. He had a framed photo on his desk. I had seen it 1,000 times. Our family at my university graduation. My mother, my father, Kamran, and me in my graduation gown, holding my MBA degree. He was looking at it when I walked in. "Sit down, Zara," he said. I sat. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he picked up the photo and held it toward me. "Do you remember what you said to me at your graduation?" he asked. I thought about it. That day felt very far away. "I said I was coming home to fix the business." He nodded. "You said, 'I'm going to build something that lasts, Baba. Watch me.'" I had forgotten that. The confidence of a 24-year-old who didn't yet know how invisible she was about to become. "I watched," my father said quietly. I didn't say it. I didn't tell you what I was seeing, and then so much time passed that it felt too late to say it." He set the photo down. "It was never too late," I said. He looked at me. "No, it wasn't." 3 months after the restructuring, my father attended an industry dinner, the annual Supply Chain Association gathering, the same event where he had introduced me as just the assistant 3 years earlier. Same venue, same crowd, many of the same people. This time I was there as managing director. This time I was on the program as a speaker, 15 minutes on supply chain resilience for mid-sized businesses. something I had lived and built and could talk about from the inside out. I gave my presentation. It went well. Afterward, people came to talk to me. Real conversations, the kind where people want to learn something, not just be polite. And then a client approached my father across the room. An older man, someone who had known my father for years. He gestured toward me and said something. I was too far away to hear it, but I watched my father's face as he answered. He straightened up. His chin lifted slightly, the expression of a man saying something that he meant completely. Later, driving home, I asked him what the client had said. My father kept his eyes on the road. He asked who the young woman was who had given the presentation, he said. He said she clearly knew the business inside out. He asked if she was new. I said, "What did you tell him?" My father was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I told him she built it. Not she helps out around the office. Not she's just the assistant. She built it." 4 words. After 8 years. From the man whose opinion I had spent 8 years trying not to need and completely needing anyway. I looked out the passenger window at the city passing by. The lights, the traffic, the ordinary Friday evening world that had no idea what those 4 words had just done to me. I didn't cry. I'm not a person who cries easily, but I pressed my hand flat against the cool glass of the window and I let myself feel it. All of it. Every late night and every silent performance review and every supplier dinner and every time I had smiled and said, yes, I help out when what I wanted to say was, I built this. I let myself feel the weight of 8 years lifting. Here is what I want to tell you. If you are the person in your family, in your workplace, in your community, who does the work nobody notices, the quiet work, the unglamorous work, the work that holds everything together while someone else takes the credit, I need you to hear this. Your work is not invisible just because it hasn't been acknowledged. Somewhere, in some filing cabinet or some drawer or some corner of the record, your contribution exists. Your name is on something. Your fingerprints are on the foundation of something that wouldn't be standing without you. Document everything, not out of bitterness, out of self-respect, because the truth lives in the paperwork, and paperwork doesn't forget even when people do. And be patient, not the passive kind of patient, not the kind where you wait and hope someone notices, the active kind, the kind where you keep building, keep recording, keep showing up, and you wait for the right moment to let the evidence speak. My father didn't change because I argued with him. He didn't change because I was angry or emotional or loud. He changed because I put 8 years of documented truth on his desk and let him read it in silence. The truth doesn't need a loud voice. It just needs the right moment. Malik Enterprises closed last financial year at 9.4 crore. The Everett Educational Fund, in our version, the Malik Skills Initiative, issued its first 5 training scholarships for young women entering supply chain and business management. I signed the approvals from my office, Managing Director's office. The nameplate on the door still feels a little unreal sometimes. I run my hand over it occasionally when I walk in, not out of pride, just to remind myself that some things, the right things, are worth waiting for. That's my story, a forgotten document, a retirement party, one message sent at a banquet table near the coat rack. If you have ever been introduced as just the assistant when you were actually the architect, this story was for you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you were underestimated. I read every single one. Subscribe to Betrayal Blood for more stories about the people who stayed quiet, did the work, and eventually let the papers do the talking.